America's Deadliest Prisons Food. Rotten Meals and the Rise of Prison Kitchen Control. This story is a dramatized adaptation inspired by real events. Some names, places, and details have been changed for privacy. Across the United States, the very act of feeding prisoners has become a story of power, neglect, and survival. Behind the towering walls of America's deadliest prisons, from Pelican Bay in California to Rikers Island in New York, meals are rarely just food. They are a weapon, a currency, and a battleground. Inmates describe trays crawling with maggots, gray, unidentifiable meat, and sour milk that turns in the carton before it even reaches the table. In some facilities, disciplinary meals, loaves of nutritionally deficient food served as punishment, have become infamous, drawing scrutiny from both courts and human rights organizations. According to an investigation by the ACLU and multiple Department of Corrections reports, these conditions are neither isolated nor new. They reflect decades of systemic neglect and the insidious influence of gang hierarchies within prison walls. At Pelican Bay State Prison, known for housing some of California's most violent inmates in its Security Housing Unit (SHU), the kitchen has long been a center of tension. Public records and court filings from the early 2010s reveal repeated violations of food safety regulations. One audit conducted by the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, CDCR, in 2013 documented spoiled meat stored above recommended temperatures, trays not cleaned for days, and rats observed near storage areas. Inmates reported falling ill after consuming meals. Symptoms ranged from nausea to severe food poisoning, leading to hospitalizations. Many of these claims were supported by internal memos, though CDCR officials often downplayed the severity, citing budgetary constraints and staffing shortages. It was almost like the food itself was a weapon, one former inmate, who requested to remain anonymous for safety reasons, said in a 2014 interview with the Marshall Project. If you didn't know the right people, the meals you got could make you sick. And if you stepped out of line with a gang or the guards, sometimes that tray wasn't just bad, it was punishment. This blend of neglect and control is not unique to California. At Rikers Island, New York City's notoriously overcrowded facility, the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division has repeatedly documented substandard meals and the influence of inmate gangs on food distribution. A 2015 DOJ report highlighted that gang leaders within the facility often determined which inmates received extra portions, who got spoiled or missing food, and who endured solitary confinement as a form of retaliation for small infractions. Court filings from class action lawsuits brought by former inmates revealed that the food itself became a tool of compliance and fear. One affidavit detailed how a powerful faction within the jail would intercept meals, ensuring that certain individuals received Nutraloaf, a tasteless, dense mixture served only as a disciplinary measure. Nutraloaf, as documented in multiple state audits and news investigations, is designed to deprive inmates of pleasure and control while still meeting minimal caloric requirements. The consistency, color, and lack of flavor have drawn criticism from nutritionists and civil rights advocates alike. In Michigan, Ohio, and New York, reports describe inmates being served the loaf for days as a form of punishment. Inmates describe it as inedible, pasty, and humiliating, with one report noting that some prisoners deliberately avoided consuming it to protest the inhumane treatment. Gang influence over food is another pervasive issue. In maximum security prisons, gangs operate like shadow governments. According to court filings and interviews conducted by Reuters, gangs in facilities such as Pelican Bay and Attica maintain strict hierarchies and control not only contraband but also access to privileges, including food. New recruits often learn quickly that compliance with gang rules determines the quality and quantity of meals. Those who disobey, or who refuse to pay the unofficial taxes demanded by gang leaders, risk receiving spoiled or deliberately reduced portions. These arrangements are often tacitly tolerated by under-resourced staff, who lack the manpower to monitor every transaction and fear retaliation if they intervene. Inmates' testimonies reveal the psychological toll of this system. Beyond physical hunger, the manipulation of meals fosters anxiety, mistrust, and a constant calculation of risk. One former inmate from ADX Florence, the federal supermax in Colorado, recounted an incident where a new inmate received a tray contaminated with spoiled meat, a subtle warning from a rival faction. "You learned quickly," he said, "not just who to avoid, but who to trust, who to owe, and how to keep your head down." Even something as small as a tray of food became life or death in terms of reputation and survival. Budget cuts exacerbate these problems. Over the past 2 decades, correctional facilities across the U.S. have faced declining food budgets even as prison populations swell. A 2018 Bureau of Justice Statistics report shows that federal and state facilities spend an average of just $2.50 to $3.50 per inmate per day on meals. This is insufficient to meet nutritional standards, let alone maintain food safety protocols consistently. In practice, this often means meals rely heavily on prepackaged, processed, and occasionally expired items. Audits in states like Louisiana and Mississippi found that expired ingredients were sometimes used in prison meals, either out of negligence or desperation to stretch budget. Yet, the most striking aspect is not always the physical quality of the food, but its symbolic function. Meals convey power, reinforce hierarchies, and signal compliance. Guards and administrators may use food as a reward or punishment, while gang leaders exploit these vulnerabilities to consolidate influence. Public records and interviews suggest that in some facilities, guards themselves admit they rely on gang hierarchies to maintain order, allowing inmate factions to control kitchens and distribution in exchange for relative calm in the housing unit. At Cook County Jail in Chicago, the influence of gangs extends to entire wings of the facility. Investigations by local news outlets, including the Chicago Tribune, revealed that meal distribution is often orchestrated by inmate leaders who determine not only what is eaten but who eats at all. Surveillance reports submitted in court filings from 2016 showed inmates trading portions of meals for favors, contraband, or protection. This shadow economy turns the very act of eating into a negotiation of survival. And yet, amid the corruption and neglect, there are moments of resilience. Some inmates document conditions, file grievances, or work to expose the system. Class action lawsuits have forced certain facilities to improve inspections, hire additional kitchen staff, and implement stricter sanitation protocols. The Prison Legal News reports that in some instances, litigation has resulted in settlements requiring prisons to maintain proper food temperatures, rotate supplies, and prevent retaliation against whistleblowers. Still, the underlying tension persists. When meals themselves become tools of control, when a tray of food can determine safety, status, or punishment, the line between survival and submission blurs. The stories told by former inmates paint a picture of a system where hunger is weaponized, budgets dictate cruelty, and gang influence dictates access. Every meal served or withheld is a chapter in a larger story of incarceration in America, a story defined not just by walls, bars, and guards, but by the subtle, pervasive power struggles over the most basic human necessity: food. In these corridors, cafeterias, and mess halls, the fight for survival is constant. It's a silent, often invisible battle, waged not with shouts or weapons but with trays, spoons, and the very meals intended to sustain life. As investigations continue and reports emerge, one truth remains clear. Understanding the reality of prison meals is not simply about uncovering neglect, it is about exposing the intricate web of power, control, and human endurance that defines life inside America's deadliest prisons. Shadow governments, gangs, kitchens, and the invisible prison economy. Inside the walls of America's deadliest prisons, power often flows through invisible channels. While guards patrol hallways and cameras scan corridors, the real control frequently resides with inmates themselves. Kitchens, once considered neutral zones for sustenance, have evolved into command centers for influence, negotiation, and intimidation. Across multiple facilities, from Pelican Bay State Prison to Cook County Jail, gangs exploit these environments, turning meals into instruments of authority. According to court filings and investigative journalism, the interplay of hunger, violence, and hierarchy creates a complex, often brutal social economy. At Pelican Bay, the Security Housing Unit's culinary operations are a prime example of this phenomenon. While the Department of Corrections provides the infrastructure, industrial ovens, cold storage, and trays sufficient for the population, the enforcement of order within the kitchen often falls to inmate crews. Public records show that these crews are typically composed of individuals aligned with powerful factions, and their influence extends far beyond food preparation. Court filings from 2012 to 2015 indicate that meals were frequently rationed, redistributed, or deliberately altered to assert dominance over rival factions. In one documented case, spoiled trays were intentionally delivered to inmates suspected of violating gang rules. Officials cited budget constraints and staffing shortages in court responses, but internal memos suggested tacit acknowledgement of the political realities inside the SHU. The consequences of this control are psychological as well as physical. Former inmates describe a constant calculus: who will get preferential treatment, who will be served last, and whose meal might be tainted. A 2014 investigation by the Marshall Project reported that food could act as a currency within the prison economy. An extra slice of meat, a carton of milk, or even access to proper utensils could be exchanged for protection, contraband, or information. Inmates navigate these exchanges carefully. Miscalculations can result in violent retaliation, social isolation, or forced compliance with gang mandate. At Cook County Jail, the scale of this informal governance is even more pronounced. News reports and court documents show that gangs operate as quasi-political entities, with leaders exerting authority over entire tiers or blocks. In some cases, leaders set quotas on meals, dictating who receives standard portions and who is punished with disciplinary food or delayed service. Surveillance footage introduced in lawsuits between 2015 and 2017 shows inmate leaders coordinating meal distribution in real time, signaling via hand gestures and whispers to subordinate. These interactions illustrate a structured, almost bureaucratic system where food is both reward and instrument of intimidation. The mechanics of this shadow government are sophisticated. Inmates in key positions can manipulate every stage of the food process: procurement and storage. Access to fresh versus spoiled ingredients can be controlled. Audit reports from multiple state facilities confirm instances of mismanaged inventories, including expired meat and unwashed trays, though internal investigations often blamed logistical errors. Preparation and portioning. Inmate kitchen crews decide how much of each item is served to individual prisoners. Testimonies indicate that compliant or high-ranking individuals often receive larger, fresher portions, while new recruits or dissenters receive smaller or substandard meals. Distribution. During tray service, gang members oversee delivery, ensuring that subordinate factions comply with internal rules. Court filings from a class action lawsuit at Rikers Island revealed that these distribution decisions were often enforced with threats, minor assaults, or the strategic withholding of food. Gangs use these controls to reinforce hierarchy and loyalty. For instance, at Attica Correctional Facility in New York, former inmates reported that kitchen access determined social standing. Those aligned with powerful factions could eat first, receive additional protein, or access commissary items reserved for the elite. Others, labeled as outsiders or informants, were relegated to less desirable food, often served cold, spoiled, or in minimal quantities. According to a 2016 investigative report in the Buffalo News, such practices intensified the prison's volatile social dynamics, fueling tension, fights, and ongoing struggles for dominance. The influence of gangs is magnified by the scarcity of resources. Federal and state budgets for prison food remain constrained. The Bureau of Justice Statistics notes that, on average, facilities spend between $2.50 and $3.50 per inmate per day. For maximum security prisons with thousands of residents, this amount often requires relying on processed, low-quality, or pre-packaged meals. Gangs exploit this scarcity, positioning themselves as gatekeepers who can redistribute food to favored individuals or punish dissenters. In doing so, they turn a limited resource into a powerful lever of social control. Contraband networks intersect with meal distribution, creating a parallel economy. Court documents and investigative journalism reveal that inmates frequently exchange food for cigarettes, cell phones, or small favors. In some prisons, entire tiers functioned as quasi-commercial hubs, where meals, hygiene products, and commissary items were traded under the supervision of gang leaders. Reports from Reuters and the Marshall Project confirm that guards are aware of these arrangements, and in many cases, they are tolerated because they maintain relative calm among populations that would otherwise be prone to unrest. This system can create brutal feedback loop. An inmate who loses favor with the kitchen gang may experience both hunger and social isolation. Food manipulation becomes a form of punishment as effective as solitary confinement or confiscation of personal property. In some cases, disciplinary loaves or nutritionally deficient meals are used selectively to punish individuals who violate gang rules or prison protocols. While controversial and criticized in audits and lawsuits, such practices persist because they are relatively low risk for administrators compared to violent enforcement measures. Yet, the story of power and control extends beyond punitive measures. Meals also serve as a form of allegiance signaling. Inmates aligned with dominant factions may receive preferential access to rare items, fresh produce, desserts, or additional protein portions. These rewards reinforce loyalty, ensuring compliance with both gang edicts and, indirectly, institutional objectives. In essence, the kitchen becomes both battlefield and boardroom, where dominance is asserted quietly and loyalty is bought not with money, but with food. The consequences of this invisible governance ripple outward. Investigative reporting, including multiple pieces by the Marshall Project, notes that inmates who are chronically underfed or malnourished are more likely to experience heightened aggression, illness, or mental health decline. Court filings and settlement agreements reveal that litigation over these practices has forced some facilities to implement oversight mechanisms, improve meal quality, and establish clearer protocols for distribution. Nevertheless, structural challenges, understaffed kitchens, overcrowding, and gang influence mean that these reforms are often partial or inconsistently applied. The human element remains central. Inmates recount that small acts of kindness or solidarity around meals can mean survival. Sharing food, discreetly protecting a tray from tampering, or quietly warning a newcomer about gang rules can save lives. These gestures underscore the duality of prison kitchens, spaces of both danger and human connection. While the architecture, bureaucracy, and gang hierarchies define the environment, individual choices and small acts of courage shape everyday survival. By the end of each day, the implications are clear. Meals in America's deadliest prisons are not merely about nourishment, they are instruments of control, symbols of status, and vectors of negotiation. They reveal the complexities of life behind bars, the interplay of power, scarcity, and human resilience. Inmates navigate an invisible social economy where the value of food surpasses its nutritional content, influencing relationships, shaping reputations, and determining daily survival. Justice, resistance, and the fight for change. While power and hunger dominate the daily lives of inmates, the story of America's deadliest prisons is not solely one of neglect and manipulation. Across the country, activists, journalists, lawyers, and inmates themselves have challenged the status quo, uncovering systemic abuses, filing lawsuits, and demanding accountability. The battle over prison meals, rot, spoilage, and the use of food as a tool of control has become emblematic of a broader struggle for justice and human dignity within correctional facilities. At Pelican Bay State Prison, a series of high-profile lawsuits over the last decade drew national attention. Inmates represented by the ACLU and private counsel filed claims citing unsafe food conditions, repeated violations of health codes, and the deliberate misuse of nutritionally deficient meals as punishment. Court filings from 2013 to 2016 documented trays with rotting meat, maggots in food storage areas, and unwashed trays repeatedly returned to cell block. Judges presiding over these cases often cited systemic negligence and ordered corrective measures, including enhanced inspections, staff training, and upgraded kitchen equipment. Despite these legal victories, implementation proved uneven. Internal memos obtained via public records reveal that some administrators interpreted court directives narrowly, leading to sporadic enforcement. Nevertheless, these cases established legal precedents, forcing correctional departments to acknowledge that food is not merely a logistical concern but a fundamental component of inmate safety and right. In Rikers Island, investigations by the Department of Justice in 2015 exposed similar patterns. DOJ inspectors found that gang leaders influenced who received proper meals, who got spoiled trays, and who endured punitive nutritionally deficient loaves. Surveillance evidence and affidavits from former staff detailed how even minor infractions could lead to hunger-based punishments, demonstrating a deliberate strategy of using meals to maintain control. As a result, a series of reform initiatives were mandated, including increased oversight of kitchen operations by independent monitors, installation of digital inventory systems to track ingredient quality and temperature compliance, creation of grievance procedures specifically related to meal quality and distribution. While reforms improved transparency, the human stories remained stark. Former inmates recount the emotional toll of hunger and humiliation. In a 2017 interview with the Marshall Project, a former Cook County Jail inmate described days when he received nothing but nutritionally deficient loaves as punishment for refusing to participate in gang-run activities. It wasn't just hunger, he said. It was fear. Every meal became a reminder of who had power over you. Food, in these contexts, is more than sustenance, it is a mirror reflecting the broader social structure of incarceration. Investigations, such as those documented by Reuters and local news outlets, reveal how inmates navigate these dynamics with both ingenuity and resilience. Some formed informal support networks to protect one another, discreetly sharing food and warning newcomers of hidden dangers. Others documented conditions, filing grievances that eventually formed the basis of litigation. These acts of resistance, small, careful, often dangerous, highlight the resilience of human spirit in environments designed to strip autonomy and dignity. Reform efforts, though imperfect, also demonstrate the potential for systemic change. In Michigan and Ohio, state audits prompted by class action lawsuits forced corrections departments to implement regular sanitation checks and temperature monitoring in kitchens, establish clear disciplinary protocols for nutritionally deficient meals, restricting their use to documented infractions, increase transparency in meal distribution, reducing the leverage of gangs over food allocation, In California, the CDCR faced multiple lawsuits from 2012 to 2016 that compelled the department to modernize its kitchens and overhaul inspection procedures. Reports indicated that improved conditions led to a measurable decline in foodborne illnesses among inmates and a modest reduction in tensions over meals in certain housing units. However, reports also note that these improvements often applied only to facilities under active litigation, leaving other units vulnerable to the same systemic issues. Beyond litigation, investigative journalism has played a crucial role in exposing these injustices. Publications such as Prison Legal News and the Marshall Project have documented recurring patterns: spoiled meals, inadequate oversight, and the manipulation of food as a tool of social control. Visual evidence, photographs of maggot-infested trays, spoiled meat, and poorly maintained kitchen facilities, has mobilized public opinion and pressured legislators to allocate additional funding for prison nutrition programs. These reports also provide a counter-narrative to the official discourse, emphasizing that inmate welfare is not a peripheral concern but a fundamental civil rights issue. The ethical dimension of this struggle is equally important. Advocates argue that the deliberate degradation of meals constitutes a form of psychological abuse, particularly when combined with gang coercion and punitive practices. Legal experts note that when inmates are systematically deprived of adequate nutrition, it can amount to cruel and unusual punishment, potentially violating the Eighth Amendment. Court opinions and settlements in multiple states affirm this perspective, leading to enforceable mandates for food quality and safety. Human stories bring the impact of these reforms into sharp focus. Inmates who once faced daily threats of punishment through spoiled meals describe how the establishment of independent oversight committees transformed their experience. In one case at Attica Correctional Facility, a former inmate testified that the introduction of grievance officers allowed him to report tampering with his food without fear of retaliation. "It wasn't perfect," he said, "but it was the first time I felt like someone on the outside actually cared what we ate." Community organizations also contribute to reform. Nonprofits, legal advocacy groups, and faith-based initiatives provide additional scrutiny and support, filing lawsuits, distributing educational materials, and monitoring compliance. These efforts have led to measurable improvements in some jurisdictions, particularly in ensuring that disciplinary meals are used judiciously, nutritional standards are met, and foodborne illness is minimized. Yet, the struggle is far from over. Overcrowding, underfunding, and persistent gang influence mean that many facilities continue to face challenges. Reports as recent as 2022 highlight ongoing violations in certain state prisons, with inmates still receiving spoiled or unsafe meals. This ongoing cycle underscores the need for sustained oversight, consistent enforcement, and public accountability. Ultimately, the story of prison meals is a story of human resilience, institutional failure, and the pursuit of justice. It reveals the intricate balance between survival and morality, highlighting the extraordinary ingenuity inmates employ to protect themselves, assert dignity, and resist dehumanization. It also illustrates the power of advocacy, litigation, and investigative reporting in compelling institutions to confront systemic failures. From the overcrowded halls of Rikers Island to the fortified blocks of Pelican Bay, meals have become more than mere nourishment. They are symbolic of control, reflective of power dynamics, and central to the daily struggle for survival. Yet, amid this harsh reality, the voices of inmates, advocates, and journalists converge to illuminate paths toward reform, accountability, and, ultimately, a more humane approach to incarceration. In conclusion, America's deadliest prisons are a stark reminder that even the most mundane aspects of daily life, eating a meal, receiving a tray, can carry profound significance. They reflect broader societal questions about justice, human rights, and the treatment of incarcerated populations. As investigations, lawsuits, and reforms continue, the story of prison meals remains a testament to the resilience of those who endure, the vigilance of those who expose wrongdoing, and the ongoing fight to ensure that basic human needs are met behind bars. Sources and references: Public Records / Verified Reports ACLU Investigations into Prison Conditions, 2013 to 2020. Department of Justice Civil Rights Division Reports, 2015. Bureau of Justice Statistics. Correctional Facilities Food Spending, 2018. Court Filings. Class Action Lawsuits, Pelican Bay, Rikers Island, Cook County Jail, 2012 to 2017. The Marshall Project. Life Inside Pelican Bay, 2014. Prison Legal News. Litigation Outcomes and Settlements, 2010 to 2020. Reuters Reports on Gang Influence in Prisons, 2015. Buffalo News Investigations. Attica Correctional Facility, 2016.